We could talk a little bit about marketing. It's just a concept. We kind of touched on that. I was kind of wondering, with Bradley and John, maybe it's the smaller players in the industry, and up against potentially gigantic billion-dollar corporations. Like, how do you approach marketing? How do you kind of keep brand awareness in an industry where people are seeing on buses the same brand over and over? Bradley, if you'd like to.
It helps if you have something to say. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of really established brands, they have very little to talk about. And people are so saturated with imagery and messaging that they tune it out. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the role of a small independent brand is to have a point of view and to communicate that point of view through all sorts of channels. So, of course, social media is one of them. But I think that gives a life to the brand that is impossible for a big company to replicate. Mm-hmm. Because a big company is inherently run by lots of people. That's why it's a big company, or that's the definition of a big company. And independent brands are run by very few people or just individuals. And so that frees you to be yourself, to express the ethos of the brand and live that. And that's, so many big companies are trying to be authentic because they're so big that it's impossible to be authentic anymore in the current atmosphere. So I think that's a wonderful. I love being a small company that's like this little speedboat, going around these giant ships, kind of
Right.
So I think it's a lot of fun to be in that position.
Cool. Well, that's a great answer, John. I mean, you're the youngest brand here, so how do you approach it? I mean, have you even really done? Well, no, you definitely are. You're kind of a guerrilla marketing sense.
I am a guerrilla marketer.
Yeah.
I find ways to connect to my audience, not just through social media, but actually running around and meeting with every person. There's sort of a disconnect with social media, as well as you can hype it up as much as you want, but at the end of the day, you have to try it on. You have to see it and experience this. So how can I relate to this? How can I feel a connection? Well, they can reach out. They can personally message me, and there is a huge bond between a customer and the owner, founder, that relationship that you might not ever have with these big companies. Mm-hmm. You might get that robotic reply, but with these independent groups, and as well as myself, it's nice to reach out and be considered a little bit more with your comments and messaging. And, mm-hmm. Yeah, I try to keep it as personal as possible. And it's been working really nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Thilo, as a brand that Miele is more established overseas than it is in the U.S. I mean, I don't know. I hope you agree with that. But how do you go about educating people in a new market about your brand?
Yeah. At first, you need time. Mm-hmm. So the good thing is I have no shareholder behind me. They push me every time to improve the business. So and another thing is you must understand the market, and the European market is not the same like the American market or the Chinese market. So that means you must speak with the people. That's why events like this, it's for us very important to learn about the market and to have the right decision for the future too. And another one is that's why I travel really a lot, because if you have the last name of the brand also as my name, so you can give, I think, at the best the emotions and your soul. And I think the products also when you're a family company or a small company or a small brand, you need a soul for the watch, then you have a better transportation to the end consumer. And they believe you, and it's not only a marketing brand where they say, oh, I have the big ads in each magazine and you must buy me. No, it's the heart blood what we have, This is what we want to give to our customers.
Great. Would you like to, and Oris being kind of the most established brand here that has some pervasive level of, I'd say, awareness, but still is smaller compared to a lot of the giants out there.
It's funny that you say that, because I spent the first 5 years walking into stores. Have you heard of Oris? Oris who?
Right.
So thank you for saying that. It was very exciting to be in this platform, because for so many years that I was, I've been with Oris since 2010, and we go out into retailers and we, present the brand. And the first thing I said, I work for Oris watches. I've never heard of Oris watches. Well, okay, so great. So we've been in business since 1904, and we give all, we're an independent watchmaker. We give your whole sales presentation. But from the marketing side, I think for us, it's just that not promoting our products with celebrity. Mm-hmm. I think the catchphrase that we use is real watches for real people, and ultimately, again, that goes to kind of who we are. So we don't pay a celebrity like some bigger brands to, hold up our watch and show it, and Rolf will always say things like that. He's not paying for so-and-so's house in Como. He's like, right. We're really putting all the money back into the watch and into that aspect. So from the marketing side, for us, it's just being real. It's that producing a watch that is of value, and not paying any extra celebrity endorsement and things of that nature. That's what we kind of feel from the marketing side for us as a brand.
Interesting. Yeah, ambassadorship it's an interesting topic. It's one that I think a lot of the brands in here might not touch on in their daily basis, but then, it's a very strong avenue, and I think you're seeing people kind of approach it differently, right? There's the celebrity, but then there's also kind of people of culture, people who are just well respected. I don't know. I mean, as a smaller brands, how do you see that? Well, actually, Bradley, you work with famous race car drivers. That's a sense of an ambassadorship.
That's true, but that's a bit different because I'm not paying them to wear a watch. Okay. Yeah. And just say like, yeah. No, I'm actually doing it because I love racing history, and it's just an excuse for me to be able to do something with these people I admire. Right. And it's a real honor to be able to work with these. I've worked with Vic Elford and now with Brian Redman, who are both heroes of mine, and to be able to share that with, just to hang out with them and work with them and interview them about their lives, and then to bring a product to market that allows other fans of theirs to kind of have something tangible that's related to that person. It's a bit different. Mm-hmm. I think from what you're saying, like celebrity marketing. But I think that in a lot of cases, like this obsession with like celebrity placement or with like media influencers is a kind of word I hate, but it's again going back to this thing that like people trying to search for this elusive sense of authenticity that they don't inherently have in their DNA, and therefore they are trying to import it from other people and like kind of graft it onto the brand, and it usually fails. And people are so savvy in this day and age that they can just smell it instantly, and it just like falls apart just like immediately. Right. So it's very rare, I think we could all agree, that when you see a celebrity branding thing that actually really works beautifully, it's very rare. Mm-hmm.
It becomes rather transparent when you see the same celebrity wearing a different watch. It's like, so wait a minute. So let me get this. You had that on, isn't it? Oh, so you paid more money. That's, right. That I think is that I think, and I think that's why it's best to just for us as independent brands, basically to kind of, for us anyways, to stay away from that. It's a picture of the watch. Let the watch tell the story.
Absolutely. It's interesting because Bradley, with your brand, like I think it plays in directly into the influences of your watches and the inspiration behind your brand. And one thing, having kind of followed your brand since you began a few years ago, right around the time that we started the blog, so kind of like seeing you grow at the same time, that you have done very, very well in the micro-independent space. And I was wondering, you might have actually sort of already answered this, but like what role really does like having such a strong story play? And everything, your brand, it's really about branding. Like to you, like what role does branding play kind of in the micro brand and in the kind of, we have new brands coming up in Kickstarter every day and a lot seem to have the same tagline. Like how do you feel like that has to do with differentiation and kind of long-term success?
When you say, what does branding have to do, define branding? Like, what does that mean?
Well, branding,
Like you're
You
talking
know,
about
that-
graphic identity. You're talking about.
Well, I
like,
think it's all part. It's a part of it, right? So your graphic identity responds to the design of your watch, which responds to the packaging, which responds to just the concept that started it all. So, right, you have a theme that is pervasive through your watches. Right?
Well, you've listed a bunch of things
Yeah.
which a lot of people skip when they start to make a watch brand.
Okay.
So that's the first thing.
All right,
It's
so
like
don't skip
you
them, right.
have to have a theme, you have to have an idea, you have to have like design, you have to have graphic identity, you have to have a cohesive idea of why this thing should exist, rather than just like I felt like making a watch today, and like I just put it on Kickstarter and it's like, well, it's pretty cool. So that to me is like that's the thing about Kickstarter I don't like, is that but then there's wonderful projects on Kickstarter too. So it's Kickstarter is just a machine for finding investment, really. But you know it does sort of have this sort of capriciousness about it, I guess you could say. But
Right. But John, you started with a core concept to your brand.
Yeah, and mine's very brand heavy, but to balance that, I always made sure that the design was very important as well. So I do have the story of this is inspired by espresso machines, and at first that may seem cliche, but it was nice to actually see the physical design of it, and everything was cohesive throughout the design. It made sense when people saw it and held it, and so I think the design should communicate everything, and that the story should support it. The story shouldn't be head first why this is an important brand. That could be more supportive. The design and why this is here in the first place is number one.
Cool. Yeah, that's an interesting way to say it, because so you're not front loading the design. You're not trying to explain the design after the fact, right? You kind of you have it all there, and then the design communicates it out. Right?
Well balanced.
Well balanced, right? Touching on Kickstarter, it seems to be kind of logical. John, as a survivor of
Kickstarter. Yeah.
What were the pros and cons of the service? Would you use it again to launch a second line, or?
Yeah, and this is the question a lot of people ask themselves. Kickstarter now, the way I see it, and I've been in it, it's getting saturated with watches all the time. We see watches that are, stock watches with subtle differences that make them unique in their eyes. And then we see really unique brands coming out of it on more rare occasions. So how do you differentiate the good brands from the bad? It is rare that you see good guys actually coming out, spending the time designing this full time and punching out a good design successfully. I do think it's getting saturated, but from my perspective, it is challenging. You are a new guy. You are one small little ant in this giant world, and you can get stepped on so easily, or just get dismissed.
Yeah.
So I basically, my guerrilla marketing, if you may, was going out and physically meeting with countless people, telling them who I am and why this is important in the first place. Watches in the first place, they're a desire, right? We know, we don't need watches. But it's important to share your story of why you even came up with this. Doing that countless times with countless people and really connecting was what worked for me. It is difficult to make sales, yeah.
Interesting. Andy, you've also used it. I mean, would you care to comment?
Yeah, it's. I think it's a great thing, because every brand or product in future might face this crowdfunding procedure. If it will go through Kickstarter or not, I don't know. But asking the crowd to support you is a really good idea. And for us, it's not only funding; it was getting in touch with people, with consumers. I mean, you are going through the retail chain. That's a total different world. I mean, you talk. When you talk about a customer, you very often talk about the customer as a retailer. When you talk about a customer, you only see the customer which is in front of you, because you small brands like us. And that's Kickstart is a great tool, but I agree there's some mess going on, especially with watches, and the people don't know what they are doing there, and they some of them never ship the stuff, or then they ship shitty stuff, and then you are luckily in place trying to figure out which makes sense and which doesn't make sense.
Trying.
It's not easy. I agree, but for a brand, I think launching a new product will always have some kind of crowdfunding component in future, because it's important to ask those people before you do something.
I think it's really important to see how much people really want it. So I think it's the perfect way to actually test a new product in the marketplace too. So if it's really successful and people are really interested in this, I think it's like the best opportunity to see that outright. And if it's not successful, there's a reason for it. So it's very transparent.
But be careful, there's a post-crowdfunding trauma.
It's scary sometimes.
Yeah, you're going like this, and then you need to get things done, and you get into trouble, and then after this, the truth comes. Where are the next customers?
Right.
And then you go down, and like companies like Pebble, who ramped up sales crazy, out of a sudden they're building up cost, and they need employees, and they are running into problems, and then they shipped all the products, and then the sales is...
Kind of just talks a little bit about online retail and where that's going, and Angela, I think Oris, to my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't do direct online. You don't have an online store, correctly? So you're still relying on a retail. So
these questions, I feel so. I mean, I know we're been around since 1904, but I kind of feel like that way with these Kickstarter. I actually,
right.
It's like it's so different from an approach that we have taken. But yeah, so we allow our authorized retailers, if they have online presence and they have a website, then we do. We're a little bit more innovative, I think, or a little bit more aggressive within some other Swiss brands that really don't allow anybody to add anything to a shopping basket per se. But as an authorized retailer, you can do that. There's also guidelines, of course, guidelines, paperwork, things to sign. But no, we do not sell directly to the end consumer, and even such in this venue, I invited specific retailers for the weekend to help them promote the brand. So none of the sales from this weekend went directly to us. We all had retail partners. So it's a different, but the internet is as we know, it's not really going anywhere, right? So you need to somehow, it's not going anywhere. So you need to embrace it. And how are you going to do this? So for us, it's adding our authorized retailers and allowing them to promote their product online and to sell that way. But
yeah, interesting. I mean, Andy, I know you have particular thoughts on this, and I mean, in kind of a summarized way, I mean, what do you think? Like, how do you think retail is going to change and be forced to change? Maybe
everything will change completely. The world we know today out there in the streets will not be the same in 5 to 10 years down the road, because customers are super informed. They know more than the retailer does. They know sometimes more than the brand itself does. And I think there's a great chance for small brands when they manage to blend retail, online and offline into one piece, because at the end of the day, people want to look on products. And they search online, and they want to find this seamless customer story, which doesn't exist, the customer journey, actually. And I think we need to try to make no difference between online and offline, which is a very difficult thing to do. I mean, everybody in this room will agree that when you go to a brand website, none of these brands can tell you where the product in a shop is. Not a single brand can do this worldwide. And that's just because they don't know, because retailers are kind of disconnected from this internet at the moment. They're using shops, which causes a lot of out-of-control sales. So people buy a watch in a store, and then they go online, pull their phone, and they find out that it's $500 less. And then it causes some questions. So is this brand reliable still? Big problem. It's a huge problem. And retailers we see foreclosures there. There's a reason why shops close, because the whole retailing landscape is super inefficient. Doesn't mean that I believe in online sales, by the way, because our products speak for themselves. So we are product people. The best marketing we can do is people look at products. So through the web, you can only transport part of this. At the end, you need to have a physical presence, and the big challenge will be how to put it together.
What's significance when you're talking to a customer who might not be as aware of the watch industry as a lot of the people in this room right now? Like what does independent mean to an end customer? Like how do you tell them what qualities does that bring to a watch or to a brand that makes it better or different? Would you like to answer or start since you kind of mentioned it?
Independence is very hard to describe because there is so many dependencies in the watch industry, and even as a small brand, and we are kind of independent, but at the end of the day, we are, from the movement side, controlled by some big companies. And if you don't get a movement, you cannot be independent because the movement is kind of a core component of the watch. Mm-hmm. And many people don't know this, and that's why we started to do our own thing, just to have no dependencies. And we could say, yeah, we are independent, but many are not really independent. And it's dangerous, I think, for a small brand to grow with a dependency from a multi-billion-dollar industry controlled by two companies or one.
I think you also touched on movements a bit and in-house and reliability. And I think so 3 of the brands up here have their own in-house movements, also rely somewhat on the infrastructures that are there. But I was kind of interested in John and Bradley as smaller brands working in a different price point. Like what challenges does movement selection and the limitation kind of pose to you? Do you start with movements? Do you end with movements? How does it all work?
Movements are it's a big part of the challenge of starting a watch company is securing a supply of movements. Also, there's a lot of groupthink around movements, and a lot of people have a lot of strong preconceptions that need to be kind of overcome through explanation sometimes. And when you're a small company, you often have limited options of what you can actually get your hands on or what you can afford. And so, if someone comes up to you and you're like this one-person company and they're like, oh, don't you have an in-house movement? It's like, you have no idea what that costs or how that is done or what, you don't know anything. And so you have to kind of educate them well, we chose this movement for X, Y, and Z reasons, and we offer it at this price point, and that we think that's a fair thing to do. And people are, then they start to think about it and they understand. But there's a lot of, especially from the internet, no offense. No, actually, they actually educate people a lot about various movements. But I think a lot of the internet groupthink is about in-house movement, when that's an infinitesimally small percentage of the overall industry is companies with in-house movements. And even big companies that have billions of dollars are not developing their own in-house movements. So therefore, you cannot expect small independent brands to all have their own. So that's a big challenge.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely see, as people who talk about affordable watches, the idea that a true watch brand is one that manufactures movements, and that doesn't make sense when you look around this room and see how many brands are clearly true watch brands and they're not manufacturing their own movements. One thing we were talking about before, and it's sticking with kind of the movement thing, is how do you really define in-house anymore? Mule, I think you're a good example. You do a lot of movement modifications, and yet you also have something you call an in-house movement. How do you define that? And I think also in glass shoot, it's a very big conversation.
Yes, of course it is.
Yeah.
If you have a class, it is a small village, and if you have 10 different watch brands over there, then believe me, there is a lot of talk in the city. And for us, it is, at the end of the day, the question, where's your price point, And for me, it makes no sense that everyone does his own movement. And for me, for example, the German should come together to have a normal standard movement, and each of the brands can modify it by themselves. So that is their own face, So it makes more sense to the Swiss, because we have 2 global players, is ETA and Sellita, and more or less the smaller brands, which has in this price range, we have no possibility in this time to have a different. So that's the way. Normally, it should be with German, for example, should come together and to develop. We have the possibilities and we have the knowledge to develop and to produce the movement. But you know, sometimes it's also difficult in Germany to find the people for this. For us, especially for Mühle, we will have both possibilities so that we use the Swiss basic movements where we modify it by ourselves, and that we have a small quantity of in-house movement, what is a higher price range for us, and where we give the opportunity to the people to see what we are able to produce. And also for my people and for my employees, it's important to see how is the developing of the company. It's also a big goal for us that they see there is a life in the company. Because if you have in this village so a lot of brands, you must be protect your employees, because we haven't any watchmakers anymore in Glashütte.
Andy, I mean, would you like to take it?
In-house is a difficult term, I would say. I would say there is not a single company who really has an in-house movement, because they all buy, they have to buy from suppliers. This means, I would say, the first thing, an own movement means you are able to develop it from engineering point of view. So a company understands the engineering behind it. That's the biggest problem, first of all. And then out of this engineering, you probably can specialize like you on some flat parts, and then you work together and you network and you bring it together. And then I would say you can call this already in-house when you start from the engineering level.
Would you say then there's a big difference between the way the public is currently perceiving in-house and the way brands and the industry
Yeah, I think
are?
that. Yeah, I do. I think that people will, say that they make their own movements and they make their own. But I really want to know you exactly. There's some parts we all know that you're just not doing. And especially at our price point. Is it relevant for us as independents to really do that? Does that really have relevance for us in our, in our price point?
I think it's possible now because we are looking into different manufacturing technology. So CNC enables smaller brands to get into manufacturing. Yeah. Before when CAM, old style, old machines, then you need millions of parts to make it work. And you cannot change this machine. But nowadays we have CNC technology, we have 3D design, we have all this kind of stuff. And smaller brands like us, which out of a sudden do their own engineering work, can do this. But it's a matter of commitment. I mean, you need to invest money there and constantly do this and do it for a very long time frame. So I would say you need 5 to 10 years to develop an own movement. But when you have it, you're pretty happy, I can tell you.
Yeah. I think it was 10 years. I think it was 10 years. I think Caliber 110, I think it took 10 years. It was about 10 years to develop. We knew we wanted to do our own in-house development again.
The first one comes out quickly.
Yeah,
one time.
You're right.
So movements aside now, there's this whole rising conversation around where things are made and transparency around the origins of things, and Swiss-made, Glashütte-made, and we're seeing a lot about American-made is becoming under very tight scrutiny as it's kind of emerging again in the watch industry. What value do you really think made in X even has anymore, with the fact that sourcing is so global and it is so, it is easy to work in China, it is easy to call, there's the internet and Alibaba and all these different things.
Where do I begin? This is a really big topic, and again, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, as with the in-house movement, about the nature of the way the industry works and the nature of manufacturing in this day and age that feeds a lot of misconceptions. And part of that begins, and I think also with the in-house movement, it also begins there, but in a different way, with a lack of a real definition of what made in entails from a perfectly legalistic point of view. Like I don't know if you saw the article on Hodinkee where they were talking about what they asked, like someone from the, was it the Department of the Interior or something, how they would define an American-made watch, and they were like, we don't know. I mean, they didn't have they didn't have a legalistic thing to just say, here it is. This is what makes an American-made watch. There's no legal definition. It's more like, does it walk and talk kind of thing. And
Right.
I think that's a really slippery thing. And then you have in Switzerland, they have a different set of laws, and in Germany they have a different set of laws, and there's no like consistency in my opinion, and therefore people are being misled by a lot of companies about the origin of wherever things are made. And the irony of this is that it only proves actually the excellence of Asian production, of Chinese production, because so many watches that are being sold as Swiss made are actually mostly made of Chinese components.
Right.
And so people are like, well, this is great because it's made in Switzerland. It's like, well, actually like 90% of that was made in China. But you don't realize that because you're being misled. So, I would say that rather than undermining the Chinese watchmaking industry, it shows the excellence of it. And it's not like that's happened overnight. This is like 40 plus years of developing an incredible manufacturing competence and a whole archipelago of supplier factories that do really specific things.
Right.
And people like to complain that there's no American watchmaking industry, but you cannot duplicate that whole process overnight. It has to occur over time, and it takes money and investment. And that is something that the Chinese, set their minds to a long time ago. So I think that they deserve a lot more respect than they get.
Yeah.
If you want to use the name of Glashütte on the dial, you must produce 50% on the movement by yourself. Only for the movement, not for the complete watch. So this is our goal to reach this, and that's the way for us it's important to do this, to use the name of Glashütte, because I will not have a good success if I miss this name, because all our neighbors also famous, and so we follow this rule. And I think people accept that you have a different price range between Lange and Söhne, for example, and for example us. And it's a good way for us to be over there, and so we will follow this.
Interesting. Yeah.
I have mixed feelings on nationalism. Because, I'm married to a Taiwan girl, and then you have intercultural connection, and national marketing is, for me, in my generation, difficult, to be honest. I think for our brand, we do not really care. Okay, we are in Switzerland naturally because we are there, but I'm German, so I could be also in Glashütte. But at the end of the day, I think for us, this is not a definition of our brand. The question is, where do we get the best technology? That's my question. And when, for example, case, we work with probably the best case factory in the world. Is a Chinese guy. He's a Hong Kong guy, and he's making the Apple cases also, and he's producing tons of stuff for Apple. And we go there because some people probably have seen our case level. That's you get there, and you need to work with this factory together. And of course, the movement parts we do in Switzerland or in Germany, we are working also together because there's this, there are the resources. It's grown. And when you come for dials, then you sometimes go to Germany, sometimes you go to Switzerland, but there's also some excellent dial maker in Thailand. Probably one of the best in the world also. And there you can do stuff like carbon fiber dials, which you cannot get somewhere else. And we can free a little bit more ourselves from, you have to, that's Swiss and you are German, you have no other choice actually. But for us, we never limit ourselves to this border, and that's kind of relaxing also, because you don't need to worry about this problem.
Right.
Good to know.
With a lot of, I think, for the Worn Around readers, there's a lot of people who are new hopefuls, starting brands, kind of getting, starting out. Maybe they go to Kickstarter, maybe they're on a longer plan. Just what advice would you give to somebody who's considering starting a watch brand? I don't know, maybe just start with John.
Oh, yeah. Don't do it on a whim, although you take the risk.
Right.
The risk is always worth it, but don't just go out and start a watch company just because you think it's going to be cool and the new next best thing. Put a lot of thought and your heart into it, as cliche as that may sound, because it becomes your lifestyle as much as the personal timepiece you create that everyone else will eventually wear. So it's a very personal piece. People will wear it. Put your heart into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I second that completely. I think, do something that is something that's meaningful to you, that you want to get up every day and think about it all day, and do something that is special and unique in the world, and it something that, look at the market and think about where there is someone not doing something. Don't just go where people are already doing stuff. There's enough people doing this thing or that thing. So think about where there's an opportunity, and create something new to fill that opportunity. That would be my biggest advice to people.
I think have spirit and soul, just like you said. I think it's important to remember. Somebody said that this is not a necessity, right? We don't. But how you relate time and how you see time, and it's really so incredibly personal. I know I look at my watch so many times during the day because the time is so important. And when you see something that you truly love and that you truly are passionate about, it will transpire into your own company. You will feel good about it. You will feel good about presenting it to all the people that we saw, and they'll feel good about receiving it too. So I think just that whole passion, and I think that we all share that. Everybody, passion for watchmaking.
Great.
I cannot say anything more because Angela said everything. It's passion.
It's
passion.
Totally. And I think it's it's how we all. It's so transparent in just this event. That everybody kind of that walked through the door, and everybody that told their story time and time again in these past 2 days. It's like I don't think any of us would have stood here for as long and agreed to talk about it and agreed to come to something like this if we didn't all share this passion for time, right? So,
Passion trumps all. Andy.
First of all, be aware it's very difficult. So if you start a watch brand, be aware you'll run against some walls very soon. And if they're in manufacturing or and then they are in sales for sure, because you think that everybody wants your stuff. But this is not true in the beginning. So you need to convince those people, and first of all, make sure that you like the watch you make. You should make the watch for yourself. And if somebody else likes it, then you probably have done something right. And that's how I would recommend to do it.